Mr. Halavei, thank you very much for joining us from Washington. Joining us right now by the phone is Mark Regev from Jerusalem, the spokesman for the Prime Minister. Mark, we've known each other a long time. I know that this is a very sensitive issue in Israel, but it's becoming an issue in the United States as well, in the political campaign. We're having a forum tomorrow in Washington with the Republican candidates who are going to continue criticizing this White House for not being supportive enough to Israel and not being aggressive enough to Iran. What should the president right now be doing?
I think the whole international community has to unite and send a very clear, crystal clear message to the leadership in Tehran, to the Ayatollahs, that the international community simply will not tolerate the continuation of their nuclear program, which, as the recent IAEA report said clearly, is a program to achieve atomic bombs. And I think if that message is sent clearly and with teeth, that message can be received and hopefully will affect their decision-making.
Mark, does the government of Israel believe that the U.S. has not been strong enough in taking the next step on sanctions and sanctioning the central bank?
No, we've supported the steps taken in the United States, the steps taken in Canada, in Europe. It's very important to beef up the pressure on Iran. Ultimately, if we want diplomacy to be successful, diplomacy has to have a bite. Diplomacy has to be vigorous. And we continue to call for ratcheting up the international pressure on Iran. That's the only way we can hope to have them abandon their nuclear program through diplomatic means.
The other larger question, of course, is the relationship between Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu. There have been high points and low points, and there's a lot of discussion, I am told, at very high levels in the White House of having the president come here. He has not been here since elected president. Many now acknowledge within his own administration it was a mistake not to come here after he had visited Cairo in the first year of his presidency. Do you think that a visit now, even though in an election year, is warranted, and would he, what would be the value of his visiting Israel, even at this late stage in his first term?
You know, if the U.S. president, if President Barack Obama wants to visit Israel, he'll be a very welcome guest. We had him here, I remember when he came as Senator Obama, would be very happy for him to come again. You know, Israel and the United States share a unique partnership, a unique relationship, one that's based on both shared values and shared interests. And any time the U.S. president wants to visit my country, I can tell you, he'll be a welcome guest.
How concerned is Israel about developments in Egypt and about the possibility, as these elections proceed, that there will be increasing radicalization and that perhaps the military will not maintain control, and even the successor leadership will abrogate the peace treaty with Israel?
We've been following the so-called Arab Spring very closely for months now. And it's clear that the Arab peoples are shaking off regimes that were authoritarian. And the question is, what are they going to be replaced with? I mean, we want to see, and I think the United States and the world wants to see greater democracy, greater accountability, greater transparency, greater freedom. That's good for the Arab peoples, and it's frankly good for Israel too, because with that you have to have peace. The problem has been that we've seen Islamists come to the fore. We've seen Islamists who are not necessarily committed to democracy and who are very hostile to peace and reconciliation with Israel. And you could have a scenario where you have, one man, one vote, but one time. And that's obviously not good for the Arab peoples. It's not good for anyone who believes in peace. We hope that with Egypt, the joint interests, the very strong interests that both sides have for peace, for security, for stability, for cooperation, will ultimately be paramount and overcome any difficulties. We both remember the terrible wars between Egypt and Israel. I mean, we fought a war in 1948. We fought a war again in 56, in 1967, and in 1973. Frankly, Andrea, thousands of people on both sides were killed in those wars. Does anyone really want to go back to that? I hope not.
And finally, Mark, do you resent the kinds of pressure from cabinet secretaries like Defense Secretary Panetta saying just this past weekend that that Israel needs to, quote, get back to the damn table with the Palestinians? Do you feel that the administration has been too tough on Israel?
We're just as frustrated. We're waiting at the table. We're waiting for the Palestinians to come. My Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has over the last 2.5 years repeatedly called for the Palestinians to return to negotiations, to return to direct peace talks with Israel. We're ready for the immediate resumption of talks without any preconditions whatsoever. We just say, show up. We're ready for a substantive discussion of all the core issues to the conflict: settlements, Jerusalem, security, legitimacy, refugees. Everything can be on the table. The trouble is, up until now, the Palestinians have taken a decision not to negotiate, not to talk, not to come to the table. So we want to see the negotiations start. We want to see them start now. The trouble has been the Palestinian side has a different position. They seem to be stuck in some sort of rejectionist mode, which says no to negotiations. We hope they change their mind.
Well, of course, there's a lot of dispute over who has been delaying the negotiations. I know both sides feel very aggrieved. To be continued. Mark Regev, thank you very much for joining us today,
Thanks
tonight here in Israel. And coming up next, our daily fix on presidential politics with Chuck